Hello, I'm Jonasz Rewiński and you're watching Break the Fake. They make them, we break them, and tell you everything you need to know. Vladimir Putin has once again invited the world to talk. This time, he wants to return to discussions about the so-called new security architecture, which, according to him, Russia has been carefully proposing for a long time, but which has fallen on deaf ears. According to the Kremlin, the crisis surrounding Ukraine did not arise because of the invasion, the occupation and missile strikes, but because Russia has feelings. Namely, it's all about security threats, interests, and of course, the eternal mantra, NATO getting too close to the borders. Well, apparently, it came so close that Russia had to send its own tanks to Kiev to balance things out, I guess.
Справедливая архитектура европейской глобальной безопасности. Мы предлагали варианты и рациональные решения, которые могли бы устроить всех в Америке, Европе, Азии, во всем мире. Считаем, что к их предметному обсуждению стоило бы вернуться, чтобы закрепить те условия, на которых может быть достигнуто и чем скорее, тем лучше, мирное урегулирование конфликта на Украине. Наглядно показал и кризис вокруг Украины, ставший прямым следствием многолетнего игнорирования справедливых интересов России и целенаправленного курса на создание угроз нашей безопасности, на продвижение к российским границам блока НАТО, вопреки данным нам публичным обещаниям. Я хочу это подчеркнуть. Вопреки данным нам публичным обещаниям.
Putin has also promised that Russia would consistently pursue its goals in Ukraine. Translated from Kremlin speak, we're gonna talk peace all you like, but also keep bombing civilians like there is no tomorrow, so it's all a sham, really. And at this stage, it is worth recalling a few boring but rather stubborn facts, just for context, so that this whole architecture is not built on sand. Russia violated the UN Charter. It trampled on the Budapest Memorandum. It started an aggressive war. It occupied the territory of a sovereign state. It is systematically destroying civilian infrastructure, ignoring deals, treaties, and international law. Is a genre Russia excels at and has practically become synonymous with. So much so that to expect it to do something different would be like expecting Taylor Swift to make a deathcore album and do a collab with Whitechapel or Brand of Sacrifice. You know, not gonna happen. The talk about promises is especially touching. It's not clear what promises they're talking about. Maybe the same ones as guarantees, red lines, and peaceful intentions, which always disappear mysteriously the moment the Russian troops cross somebody else's border. The conclusion seems perfectly logical and consistent with Russia's foreign policy in recent years. Russia destroys cities, energy infrastructure, and lives, and also Russia, let's talk about security. Security, as understood by the Kremlin, is when everyone is unsafe except those who sit deep underground and discuss the architecture of the world, looking at a map where neighboring countries are somehow considered to be nothing but wayward provinces. By the end of 2025, the Russian passport machine had clearly fallen ill. The issuance of passports to citizens of Tajikistan, Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan had sharply declined. Whereas in 2022, for example, more than 173,000 Tajiks became holders of the Russian passport, last year there were only isolated cases of that. In fact, the process has almost ground to a standstill. Traditionally, Moscow has used labor migration and simplified citizenship procedures as instruments of soft power, attracting workers, recruiting them into the army, and fostering loyalty to the Kremlin, of course. Now, instead of soft power, there is apparently a cold shower, and people from the region are beginning to reorient themselves towards other global and regional centers of influence. Restrictions on access to the Russian labor market and citizenship have not only destroyed old levers of influence, but also pushed Central Asia toward new partnerships. From economics to psychology, countries in the region are clearly showing that the Russian Union is no longer really fashionable and are looking toward other options and other players. As a result, the Russian Federation's harsh xenophobic practices are working actively against them. The Kremlin is not only losing real control, but also demonstrating that soft power without loyalty or partners willing to and able to perpetuate Russia's agenda is like a beautiful illusion. It looks great until you try to use it. Now, a Russian passport in Central Asia has actually become so rare that it could be put in a museum next to dinosaur bones. You know, the dinosaurs used to rule the roost but ended up extinct. Except, it's kind of like the dinos launching an asteroid at themselves when it comes to the invasion of Ukraine, of course. Definitely not a natural disaster for Russia. Russian propagandist Vladimir Solovyov has once again gone on air with his "let's get everything out in the open" brand of geopolitics. This time his imaginary briefing included the following. The US military budget is $1.5 trillion. Europe should get ready, and it turns out that it would be very beneficial for Russia to actually go to war with Europe. The cherry on top is the willingness to, and I quote, help Trump free Greenland from foreign influence. Why not? Indeed.
$1,500 триллиона военный бюджет Америки. И для нас это очень выгодно, если это будет война с Европой. И мы будем готовы помочь Трампу освободить Гренландию от этого чуждого влияния. А чего нет? Кстати, мне понравилось, европейские идиоты вдруг решили, что Америка союзник. Америка никакой не союзник. Америка с 1945 года держит свои оккупационные войска на территории Европы. Она вам никакой не союзник, тупые европейские скоты. Она ваш хозяин. И хозяин вам сейчас скажет: стоило. И вы побежите, хрюкая, в хлев. И будете смотреть и думать, как Стаммер, который не может сказать, что же это было в Венесуэле. И по Гренландии ничего не сможете сказать. И войска свои не сможете доставить в Гренландию. А, у вас нет войск. Б, вам их не на чем доставить. Вас потопят американцы по дороге, если захотят. А мы поможем. Ну, просто из любви к искусству. На мой взгляд.
Now, the logic here is pretty simple. If the United States spends a lot of money on its military, then Russia urgently needs to find itself another war, preferably with Europe for some reason. And to keep things interesting, it should grab Greenland as well, apparently as a bonus for start two wars, get the third one free promotion. The idea of helping Trump sounds particularly outlandish. Not long ago, Russian propaganda explained that the US was humanity's main enemy. But now, lo and behold, Moscow is ready to lend a helping hand. True, this helping hand usually ends in mobilization, sanctions, and empty shelves, but they don't talk about that on air because it spoils the picture. Russia, which cannot provide heating to its own people, loses more troops in Ukraine than it can mobilize on a monthly basis, and does 19th century cavalry charges in the 21st century because it can't deal with constant equipment attrition, is suddenly ready to liberate a piece of land hundreds of miles away. Plus, it does this pathetic "notice me, senpai" thing whenever it sees Donald Trump might glance at them favorably. This, by now, is something of an obsession. But then, come to think of it, when Moscow sees Trump do Caracas in 3 hours and remembers how its own Kiev in 3 days turned into 3 years and counting, almost 4 actually, it suddenly gets all beady-eyed and is like, "Oh, Mr. Trump, let's be friends." Guess it's not enough that they are a junior partner to China already. Now they want to be a junior partner to anyone who does strength better than them. May I suggest Azerbaijan? They also did a quick one in Nagorno-Karabakh. And also Israel, who sucker punched Iran in a way that left everyone dazzled. So many countries to be a junior partner to. Or better still, there is another option. Go home, Russia. You're drunk with delusions of grandeur. It won't let you dodge the economic and social hangover, but at least you save yourself the embarrassment. And with this, we conclude this edition of Break the Fake. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates.